Hi guys, Tom here, and in this video I want to introduce you the Manhattan Project, the research and development undertaking during World War II that produced the first nuclear weapons. If you want more information, check the sources in the description, and if you like military history, please consider to subscribe to my channel. Manhattan Project was a research and development undertaking. It was led by the United States with the support of the United Kingdom and Canada. From 1942 to 1946, the project was under the direction of Major General Leslie Groves of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and Robert Oppenheimer was the director of the Los Alamos Laboratory that designed the actual bombs. The Manhattan Project began modestly in 1939, but grew to employ more than 130,000 people and cost nearly $2 billion, about $23 billion in 2019 dollars. Over 90% of the cost goes for building factories and to produce fissile material, with less than 10% for development and production of the weapons themselves. Research and production took place at more than 30 sites across the United States, the United Kingdom and Canada. The discovery of nuclear fission by German chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann in 1938 made the development of an atomic bomb a theoretical possibility. There were fears that German atomic bomb project would develop one first, especially among scientists who were refugees from Nazi Germany. A committee meeting on the 21st of October 1939 reported back to Roosevelt in November that uranium would provide a possible source of bombs with a destructiveness vastly greater than anything else known. On 28th of June 1941, Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8807, which created the Office of Scientific Research and Development. The office was empowered to engage in large engineering projects in addition to research. In Britain, Fritsch and Rudolf Perez, the University of Birmingham, had made a breakthrough investigating the critical mass of uranium-235 in June 1939. Their calculations indicated that it was within an order of magnitude of 10 kilograms, which was small enough to be carried by a bomber. In July 1940, Britain had offered to give the United States access to its scientific research, briefed American scientists on British developments. On 9th of October 1941, President Roosevelt approved the atomic program. The control of the program, he created a top policy group consisting of himself, although he never attended a meeting, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson, and the Chief of Staff of the Army, General George C. Marshall. Roosevelt chose the Army to run the project rather than the Navy because the Army had more experience with management of large-scale construction projects. The day after he took over the project, Groves took a train to Tennessee to inspect the proposed site there, and he was impressed. Initially known as Kingston Demolition Range, the site was officially renamed Clinton Engineer Works (CEW) in early 1943. While Stone and Webster concentrated on the production facilities, the architecture and engineering firm Skidmore, Owings and Merrill designed and built the residential community for 13,000. The community was located on the slope of Black Oak Ridge, from which the new town of Oak Ridge got its name. The population of Oak Ridge soon expanded well beyond the initial plans and peaked at 75,000 in May 1945. The idea of locating Project Y, the laboratory itself, at Oak Ridge was considered, but in the end it was decided that it should be in a remote location. The Los Alamos Laboratory, also known as Project Y, was a secret laboratory established by the Manhattan Project, operated by the University of California during World War II. Its mission was to design and build the first atomic bombs. Robert Oppenheimer was its first director, serving from 1943 to December 1945. On Oppenheimer's recommendation, the search for a suitable site was narrowed to the vicinity of Albuquerque, New Mexico, where Oppenheimer owned a ranch. And now let's talk about the weapon design itself. In 1943, development efforts were directed to a gun-type fission weapon with plutonium called Thin Man. Initial research on the properties of plutonium was done using cyclotron-generated plutonium-239, which was extremely poor but could only be created in very small amounts. Los Alamos received the first sample of plutonium in April 1944, and within days it was discovered that the reactor-bred plutonium was unsuitable for use in a gun-type weapon. The plutonium would start the chain reaction too quickly, causing a pre-detonation that would release enough energy to disperse the critical mass with a minimal amount of plutonium reacted. A faster gun was suggested but found to be impractical. By July 1944, Oppenheimer had concluded plutonium could not be used in a gun design and opted for implosion. The accelerated effort on an implosion design, codenamed Fat Man, began in August 1944 when Oppenheimer implemented a sweeping reorganization of the Los Alamos Laboratory to focus on implosion. Two new groups were created at Los Alamos to develop the implosion weapon, X for Explosive Division and G for Gadget Division. And now let's talk about the Trinity nuclear test. Because of the complexity of an implosion-style weapon, it was decided that despite the vast of fissile material, an initial test would be required. Groves approved the test subject to the active material being recovered. Consideration was therefore given to controlled fissile, but Oppenheimer opted instead for a full-scale nuclear test codenamed Trinity. In March 1944, planning for the test started and the bombing range near Alamogordo Army Airfield was chosen as the site for the test. It was called Trinity Base Camp and it contained barracks, warehouses and workshops. For the actual test, the weapon, nicknamed the Gadget, was hoisted on the top of a 30-meter steel tower, as detonation at that height would give a better indication of how the weapon would behave when dropped from a bomber. Detonation in the air maximized the energy applied directly to the target and generated less nuclear fallout. Observers included Groves and Oppenheimer, among other scientists. The test was a plutonium device of the same design as the Fat Man bomb later detonated over Nagasaki on August 9, 1945. At 5:30 on the 16th of July 1945, the Gadget exploded with an energy equivalent of around 20 kilotons of TNT, leaving a crater in the desert 76 meters wide. The shock wave was felt over 100 miles away, and the mushroom cloud reached 12.1 kilometers in height. It was heard as far away as El Paso, Texas, so Groves issued a cover story about an ammunition magazine explosion at the airfield. And now let's talk about the personnel of the Manhattan Project itself. In June 1944, the Manhattan Project employed some 129,000 workers, of whom 84,000 were construction workers, 40,000 were plant operators, and 1,800 were military personnel. As constructive activity fell off, the workforce declined to 100,000 a year later, but the number of military personnel increased to 5,600. procuring the required number of workers, especially highly skilled workers, in competition with other vital wartime programs proved very, very difficult. In 1943, Groves obtained a special temporary priority for labor from the War Manpower Commission. In March 1944, both the War Production Board and the War Manpower Commission gave the project their highest priority. One source of personnel was the Army itself, particularly the Army Specialized Training Program. Another source was the Women's Army Corps, WAC. Initially intended for clerical tasks handling classified material, the WECs were soon tapped for technical and scientific tasks as well. And finally, let me talk about the costs of the project. The total of 4 weapons, the Trinity gadget, Little Boy, Fat Man, and the unused Fat Man bomb, were produced by the end of 1945, making an average cost per bomb around $500 million in 1945 dollars. By comparison, the project's total cost by the end of 1945 was about 90% of the total spent on the production of US small arms, not including ammunition, and 34% of the total spent on US tanks during the same period. Overall, it was the second most expensive weapons project undertaken by the United States in World War II, behind only the design and production of the Boeing B-29 Superfortress. Following a domestic debate over the permanent management of the nuclear program, the United States Atomic Energy Commission, AEC, was created by the Atomic Energy Act of 1946 to take over the functions and assets of the Manhattan Project. It established civilian control over atomic development and separated development, production, and control of atomic weapons from the military. Military aspects were taken over by the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project. Although the Manhattan Project ceased to exist on 31st of December 1946, the Manhattan District was not abolished until 15th of August 1947. Thank you for your attention. See you in the next video.